This is Freedom Investor Radio, and I'm John Pearl. It hit me like a freight train when I realized there was a better way, when I discovered that I could take my future into my own hands, when I realized I could invest my way to freedom. This is what I'm working towards. In each episode of Freedom Investor Radio, we will explore the tactics and strategies used by the top real estate investors and entrepreneurs in the nation. We will learn how you can start investing your way to freedom and take control of your life. Thanks so much for tuning in. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Freedom Investor Radio. I'm your host, John Pearl. Today, I'm joined by Luc D'Abreau of Make It Rain Capital. Luc, welcome to the show today, my man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, John. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So looking forward to this conversation today. So Luc and his wife, Daisy, are the principals at Make It Rain Capital. And I saw their name floating around. So I joined a program called Multifamily Masters, and we had a Slack channel, kind of an online chat platform. And I saw their names floating around. Luc and I connected. We have some ties here on the central coast of California, where I'm located. So Luc went to college here at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and this was probably about 2 years ago, year and a half. And now we're just now connecting, first time chatting. So Luc, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing in the real estate space and how you got there?
Yeah, so now I'm, like you said, a principal managing partner with Make It Rain Capital. It's a firm that Daisy and I, my wife, co-founded, and we purchase and operate multifamily apartments. We're mostly focused here in Central Texas. And we look at new stuff, old stuff, and that's really what we're focused on. But how I got here, really, it kind of started when I was growing up. So my dad, he was from Trinidad, and coming here as an immigrant at 21, very entrepreneurial. Growing up, it was very normal to start a business, to have something going on. He did all sorts of things. It was very normal for me growing up, but looking back on it, it definitely wasn't normal. He had like a modeling studio. He ended up working with school districts and was a motivational speaker for like at-risk youth. He had his own radio program as well. And I interviewed a teacher when I was like 7 or 8. So there's all these, this stuff was very normal for me growing up. And so, that's one piece of it, like this entrepreneurial business side of things. Right. But then also there was the real estate side of things. He and my mom ended up having a couple of single family rentals. And I kind of saw that growing up and ended up thinking, probably nothing really much at the time other than just in my environment, ended up seeing these things happening. But it wasn't until I ended up finishing, I went to Cal Poly, and then I went to UCLA for grad school afterward. And right when I finished grad school, I actually read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I don't remember how I came across it, but I ended up reading it. And it was all these things that I knew to be true, John, but I just hadn't seen explicitly stated somewhere before. But everything in that book made sense, and it was so simple and so concise. So I ended up looking for ways to get involved in real estate. I was living in LA at the time after finishing school there, and nothing in the general LA area made any sense, or broadly speaking, most of Southern California either. So I looked out of state. Eventually, I came across passive investing through a friend of mine, actually another Cal Poly alum, another fellow Mustang. And I invested passively into a deal here in Texas, out in San Antonio, about 5 years ago. And then invested in another with the same group, with the same operators. And then a couple of years later, Daisy and I were talking, and we figured, hey, we need to get on the general partnership side just for our goals and what we want for ourselves, for our families. And hence the move out here to Texas and starting Make It Rain and starting the podcast. And that's the story here.
I love it. So you went to school. I understand you got your undergraduate at Cal Poly SLO and went down to Los Angeles for a graduate degree. So I understand you're in the W-2 world still, right? Is that correct? And what capacity are you in the W-2 world?
Yeah, so I work full time at a tech startup, actually. So I've always worked in the construction industry. I went to school for engineering, and I've always worked in the design and construction side of things. And it's actually a startup here in Austin that I work at, and I've worked in sales capacities. And I now work in a marketing capacity, actually.
Got it. Got it. So it's really interesting, hearing about your upbringing with your father being in the, entrepreneurial world. I'm completely the opposite. My parents were both W-2 workers, didn't have any idea really about, it was kind of always go to school, go work for somebody else, and, work until you're in your 60s. And, what was it, having a father in that role of the entrepreneur, and then you still kind of decided to go the college route and the W-2 route. What was the decision-making process like for that?
Well, the interesting part about it is like my dad was very entrepreneurial, but then when he was in his mid 20s, he ended up getting drafted into the military. And so he did have W-2s. He had two, in fact. He was in the reserves in the Army, and ended up being a lieutenant colonel by the time he retired. And then he also worked as a parole agent as well. And so he had his W-2s, but then he was always working on something. My education was extremely important to my parents, both of them, like extremely, extremely important. But, by like all of us, none of us are what's the way to put it, congruent, right? Like we're all sort of walking contradictions in a certain way. And I say that in a positive way. And that's the case for my dad. He was very, very like regimented and very conservative in a lot of ways, right? Because he wanted a pension, et cetera, et cetera. But then he he'd started all these different businesses and always had these entrepreneurial ventures. And so just me, the way that my personality is, John, and being more kind of following the tried and true path, I ended up going to school. And even now, I've talked about this to people. It's like I'm not inventing a new product. I mean, this is one of the oldest industries that's existed, owning a piece of real estate and renting it out for somebody else to live in, right? There's not a whole lot that's new about it. There's a lot of ways that you can end up having innovation in the industry because it is a very archaic industry in a lot of ways. But it's a pretty tried and true, rather boring, if that's the right word, business that exists. And so even though I would say I'm entrepreneurial for sure, I'm still going down a very, tried and true path nonetheless.
Yeah. What's your opinion? I've heard Gino Wickman, author of a number of business books, Traction. He talks about, kind of the nature versus nurture aspect of entrepreneurship. Like you're born with it. You can't, you either have it or you don't. But I tend to disagree with that because I don't, I think for me, it was kind of this of a discovery process. And I wouldn't say I'm a, full on entrepreneur by any means. And it sounds like you're kind of the hybrid route as well. But what's your take on that? Is it something that you can learn, or is it something you just kind of have to have in you?
I think I would say it's a combination. And by the way, I love Gino Wickman. Like Daisy and I, we use EOS and Traction to like run Make It Rain.
So good. Yeah.
Yeah, it works. It's very good. Anybody who hasn't read it, go out and read it. But I think it's a combination. I don't know. Like so much in life, there is a lot of gray that exists. I think a lot of times we think in black and white, and I do as well, because that's how you need to make decisions. But it's also like there is a lot of gray, and it's hard to end up saying, yeah, you absolutely would have been an employee, or this other person absolutely would have been an entrepreneur. So yeah, the funny part is like when I was an undergrad, I always thought I'm going to own my own engineering firm. Like I remember I'm 19 and I'm thinking that. So like that sort of thing was always in me, right? It's just what would it end up looking like is really the question at the end of the day.
Got it. So getting back to the real estate stuff. So you got your start as a passive investor, and for folks who may not be familiar with the term, passive investing, talking syndications here. So pooling resources, money together to purchase a larger, more efficient asset, like an apartment building. You can do it in other spaces, self-storage, mobile home parks, hotels, anything really. But Luke's talking about being a passive investor. So he provided capital to a team who was purchasing a larger asset within a syndication, and then he's a passive owner of this asset. So he gets a return while a more experienced team is operating all the day-to-day operations. So that's what we're talking about here. And then you ultimately decided to go onto the other end of that, the general partnership, into the, where you are involved in the day-to-day operations. And understand you made the decision to move from Los Angeles to Austin. I think a few other people may have made that decision as well over the past couple of years. How important has that been for your business?
It's been extremely important. One, because it's for a number of reasons, John. One is that we're able to have me be working full-time as a W-2 worker and then part-time with Make It Rain, whereas Daisy's a full-time real estate professional at this point. And so she's able to have, that just opens up so much more time, right? Because of the cost of living difference. That's a big thing. The other part too is like being here local in the markets, it does end up changing things. There was a first deal that we ended up getting involved with here. If we didn't move into the market, if we weren't living here, it wouldn't have happened. I can say that for sure. And it's because we were here. The entire team was in Central Texas. So it's been instrumental for sure. The big thing is the broker relations. That matters a lot. Different markets are different. I can't speak to others, but Texas is like a handshake, old school way of doing business. And it's like, you need to see somebody face to face, right? Maybe it works different in other markets. I'm not sure, but here that matters a lot. And so us being here and being available and being able to touch and feel what we're actively underwriting and offering on and potentially getting under contract and syndicating ends up mattering a lot. And it's been instrumental to us making progress.
Got it. And so you mentioned you still full-time W-2, wife, Daisy, real estate professional. Understand there's some tax benefits to going down that road. Now, neither one of us are tax professionals, but it's not tax advice here, but can you touch a little bit on how that benefits you as a real estate investor?
Yeah, I can touch on my own personal situation. So for me, I end up making X amount of dollars as earned income, as W-2 income, right? I get my W-2 form. But because we have these passive losses as well, and Daisy is acting as a full-time real estate professional, we can take expenses that she has and end up writing down my earned income because we're married and we're filing together. And then those passive losses that we have as well, that we get on our K1s, we get these K1 forms from our investments. We're able to take that and write down my earned income as well. So that's really the big thing. And the way that Daisy qualifies for the IRS as a full-time real estate professional is that we have active investments where she's actively involved in managing and working on these properties. And then she's doing that more than any other work that she has, right? And this is the only work that she has. It has to be at least 750 hours a year, which isn't a super high mark if anybody does the quick math. But yeah, we're able to do that. And last year, that's the thing. We did it like she qualified in 2021. We haven't filed our 2021 taxes yet because of course we kicked them down the road and we're doing a late filing like we should because we want to keep our money. Yeah, we'll be able to end up taking advantage of that this year, which will be big for sure.
Yeah, that's one of the most powerful concepts in real estate investing for paying the least amount of taxes possible legally, of course. So speaking of working with your wife, let's talk about that. So I'm married. My wife and I we're not business owners together, but any marriage, you have to you have to work together to make it work. Now, tell me about the process, how that's been, and just kind of let's go down that road a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny. So, a couple years prior, maybe 5 years prior, I ended up starting another business with a friend of mine, so I'd already like done certain things like, okay, let's just get to an MVP, whatever that ends up looking like. And so I'm one of those, I shoot before I aim type of people with certain things I don't, but certain, like when it comes to especially marketing or just getting an MVP out there, I'm very much that way. I think it's better to just do it and figure the rest out later because I have a bias for action. Whereas with Daisy, she hadn't done those things before. And so early on, it's more like I was kind of being pushy. I probably very pushy is what she would say. And I remember her saying, it's like, I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if we can do this, because we were just decided to start a podcast. And I was like, well, let's just do a couple episodes, see what happens. And, we ended up having to have a come to Jesus moment, right? And figure out like, okay, well, if we're going to do this, like, how would it end up working? And she realized she needed to end up pushing herself a little bit more, and I needed to kind of pull myself back a bit, right? So that was definitely a learning lesson in order to be able to make it work. And then honestly, like the first year that we really were working together, kind of late 2020, early 2021, we're figuring out, well, number one, what did we have the time to do there's different things that need to get done, right? What did each of us have the time to do? What were each of us actually good at doing? And what are those things that we actually wanted to do? Because there's stuff that you can be good at doing that you actually don't want to do. And that's not a good recipe. It's like, okay, well, how about we outsource that, or we try to minimize that as much as possible? Or it could be the flip side. It could be that you like doing it, but you're just not very good at it either. And so that's something to think about. And so we had to figure out what those lanes were. It was an iterative process. It wasn't easy, but Traction, Gino Wickman, that actually helped out significantly, because we're able to kind of take a step back and look at things objectively as best as possible, John, and be like, okay, Luke, we have this certain goal and things aren't tracking appropriately toward that. Let's figure out why that's happening. It's not pointing fingers. It's not placing blame. It's more like, we have this quote unquote issue. How do we end up solving that? Is this even the right metric that we should be looking at? Like, should you even be doing this? Should we be doing something else? Should somebody else be doing what you're doing? So that iterative process was very helpful. And now we have, our swim lane, so to speak, and she takes care of what she takes care of, and I take care of what I take care of. We have joint decisions, of course, but everything ultimately rolls up to somebody who makes the final decision.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I can imagine there would be some growing pains turning that into a successful partnership. That's awesome to hear. You guys are making it work out so well. I understand you have a recent addition to the family as well, and how has that been navigating those waters?
Yeah, so David Victor D'Abreau Serrano, long name. He was born a month ago today, actually, John, like we were talking about off camera. And navigating that has been interesting. So we already knew that he was going to be coming. He came a little bit early for us. He surprised us a little bit, right? So we already planned for 2 quarters that Daisy would just be on maternity leave, right? And so if we don't make any more quote unquote progress with Make It Rain for the next 6 months, then that's fine. We just looked at trying to keep things kind of steady, so to speak. But this past month I've been on paternity leave for my W-2, which has been good because I've been able to like, shift priorities around and then offload some things to other resources, like outsource some things as well. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, you're a father, right? You're a father of 3, each of them 2 years apart. And well, I guess the oldest and the youngest are 4 years apart, but you know what I mean. Yeah, it's been great. It's been interesting. I know that, he'll be exposed to a lot more than I think I was exposed to, a lot more than my parents were exposed to, a lot more than my grandparents were exposed to. And I think that's the goal ultimately, right? That's a big reason why we moved out here. We didn't have any family out here. We wanted to be able to move things forward for ourselves and for our family, like our nuclear family, but then our, larger family, like our siblings and our parents as well. And so it's been interesting. I mean, it's been interesting for sure, but I think it's worth it. I don't know how it couldn't be. And it's been good. It's been good.
Yeah, it's, having kids, for anybody that doesn't have them, it's a complete lifestyle adjustment. Not that would come as any surprise, but, I've honestly found for me, it's made me more productive. And it's, because I have much less free time now, I make the most of the time that I do have. And so that, it's made me a lot more efficient, I guess I should say. So congratulations on that. It's such an awesome blessing having kids. But back to the real estate stuff. So I want to know why you decided to go right into multifamily as opposed to, just going out and buying a getting in touch with a local agent and, giving them your criteria and then going in and buying a single family investment property? What was your thought process there?
Well, I had played the Rich Dad Poor Dad game, that cash flow game, enough to where I'm like, I just didn't like the scale of it, of doing single family. I thought it might end up taking a little bit longer. And the big part was the risk, right? So I'm pretty risk averse, I would say. That's why, apartments have the lowest cap rates of all commercial multifamily, right? Like it's a very risk averse industry, broadly speaking. And so when I say I'm risk averse, if you have one door, if it's vacant, then you have no revenue. And if you have 10 doors and you have one vacant, you still have 90% of your revenue. And that was something that I was thinking about. And that was in my mind, so that was really the big reason. The other part too was like, I didn't want to manage. I knew if I was going to manage a single family, I wasn't going to pay a property manager because it would have taken too much and I probably wouldn't have cash flowed. And I wasn't going to manage it myself, from somewhere else. And I wasn't going to buy a something in a C or D class neighborhood in Southern California. The other thing too was growing up, John, I saw my parents, right? They had 2 single family rentals. And I saw kind of how that went. And I was like, it was for a lot of those reasons, like I was just talking about, but then also seeing like screening tenants and then like property management, they're not getting it's almost not enough money for them to end up working very hard at it. That's the other thing too. It's there's just not enough juice to squeeze out of it. So, I don't know. It just never made sense to me. I was like, well, I'll just go big. I'll just go bigger and because that's where I want to go anyway. I'll just do that. And then, kind of figure things out along the way.
Got it. And then, with the goal of getting involved on the, the active side of it, the general partnership side, what better way than to, invest in a syndication as a limited partner with an experienced team who you trust, know, like, and trust, of course. And that's very similar to my story. I believed in the bigger picture of, commercial multifamily, and what better way to get involved? You get to experience the returns and also learn the business. When you're in a syndication as a passive investor, one of the things you want to be sure of is, the communication rhythm. You want to make sure that you're going to be getting the proper updates, and, that's something you want to look out for prior to investing as a limited partner in a syndication. But when the general partner does have good communications, as they should, you learn a lot about how the business plan works. It's not for everybody. Not everybody wants to be on the general partner side, but if you are looking to get involved on the general partner side, investing first as a limited partner is a great it's a great first step to take. So, being involved, having a W-2 job, being involved on the general partner side of things, it's, I can tell you, I'm in a similar situation. There's a lot going on. What kind of strategies, routines do you have to kind of keep you on track, get you set up for success, and just keep you in line with all the longer term goals that you have?
Yeah, I think, first having the longer term goals, like you were saying, because then you have a North Star to point to, and then, on a weekly or monthly basis, like, hey, am I taking actions that are going to move me forward to that? Right. So that's one big thing. But then having actual structure in place ends up mattering a lot to me. I'm very much like a structured person, I would say. And so even now, right, like I wake up between 5 and 5:30 in order to feed my son. I do one of the morning feedings. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I'll finish feeding him by 6:30. I can end up doing like my morning routine of like writing my goals and like do a little bit of reading and meditation, make my coffee. By 7, I'm done. 7 to 8 is make it rain. At 8 o'clock, I'll end up leaving for work, and like that's already the calculus that I've done in my head. So, beyond that, having that like actual structure and time mattering a lot to me in that way. We use different technology, like we use HubSpot in order to manage our deals, right? They have a deal tracker, so to speak, for their sales platform. So we use that. And like I use Asana to do asset management and to come up with like standard operating procedures and business procedures. So that way, if we're hiring somebody on Upwork to do something, it makes it a lot easier. If we're hiring somebody, period, it makes it a lot easier. So also having those systems in place ends up, and kind of leveraging the technology ends up helping out a lot too, John.
Yeah, absolutely. I use Asana as well. And, I just started really using it and really kind of educating myself and like making it my preferred platform for organizing my life, because it's easy with all that's available out there. It's easy to get caught up, and from my experience, you should focus on one. I did it with Asana, and it's been a game changer, managing the stuff that we've got going on as well. So yeah, I've found that if you're not doing something like that, it's easy to kind of get lost in the sauce. And if you're not keeping track of everything you got going on and reminding yourself your longer term goal, as you were saying, breaking it down into bite-sized chunks, it's very easy to get off track. And so right now it's kind of a crazy time in the market. I want to pivot a little bit to kind of what's happening out there in the market, and what are you seeing in Texas? It's kind of crazy all over. Interest rates hikes, recession, are we in one, are we not, is there one on the horizon? What are your thoughts, and how are you pivoting what you're doing in business right now with the current environment?
Yeah. So, essentially with rates increasing, right, and the R word getting thrown around, a lot of us, the way that as syndicators and sponsors, the way that we end up getting these deals done is by raising capital from individual investors, from retail investors like yourself, like myself, like a lot of your listeners, I'm sure. And so a lot of them have kind of pulled back recently, where they're a little more gun shy, and they're like, well, I want to save, I want to keep this dry powder in savings rather than trying to invest it right now, because I'm not sure what the future looks like. And so that's been a wake up call for us to end up kind of looking at other avenues in order to be able to raise equity for deals, instead of just not solely from retail investors and individuals, looking at whether it's funds or preferred equity or things along those lines, just because a lot of those institutions, they have a mandate and they need to deploy the capital. And so that's something that we've thought that we were already looking at and thinking about, but this was a good opportunity to highlight it, I would say, for sure. The other thing that we've been seeing too is that cap rates are moving, anywhere from 10 to 15, maybe as much as 20%, right? Depending on what the asset is. But I wasn't sure that they would move this quickly, but they definitely are. And it's just, the debt's just completely changing what things are, with what's happening, right? If your debt's increasing by, I don't know, debt's increased by a quarter to a third of what it was before. If you're just looking at a pure interest rate, your return, you still have to get your return. I mean, to investors, it's like, okay, well, you promise certain returns, and the return expectations haven't changed as quickly as the debt has. And so we've seen pricing getting adjusted. And even CBRE had a report at the end of last month that came out maybe like 10 days ago. And they were showing that Class A multifamily, like core middle of downtown areas, like cap rates have moved. And it was from a survey that they did from a bunch of sponsors. And so it is happening. That's the other thing that we've seen too, which we feel good about. I mean, we like that because it's a bit promising. Better to have a lower price than cheaper debt, in my opinion, for a number of reasons. But those are the two main things that we've been seeing right now, John, is just retail investor sentiment, and then also where cap rates have moved and how quickly they have.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting out there right now. I mean, some of the things I've been looking at, just the bigger picture stuff. We are at an extreme shortage of supply as far as the number of units we need to house the number of people who need houses. So we've got that going for us. Additionally, it's unfortunate. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, the bigger picture, like it's not a good setup. But as far as investing, to me, it looks good as far as a good place to put our money. Now, additionally, look at how much money's been created in the past couple of years. Something, I think, like 40% of the money that's in supply, in circulation right now, has been created since 2020. Could be off a couple percentage points on that, but it's a lot, and it's all competing for yield right now. And so what I'm seeing, I just heard, I forget who it was, one of the big institutional funds is putting together a $50 billion fund to purchase real estate. I don't know if you heard about that, but it's the institutions are not going to stop buying, and I think that's going to generally keep things from crashing overall on the bigger picture. I don't know. Are you are you adjusting your underwriting to meet the current environment? Or are you guys holding off as well and waiting to see what happens?
We're still underwriting. We're underwriting now. We're underwriting less than we were before, especially because it's like, well, our son's a month old, right? So we're underwriting a
Sure.
little bit
Yeah.
less in that respect. But right now we're underwriting more so in order to kind of see what works and what doesn't, and then just have general conversations with brokers and making sure that's like, hey guys, like we're still around, we're still underwriting, right? We're not touring as much because it's more difficult to literally tour because Daisy is the one who would do the touring. But yeah, we're still out there in the market. I think, like you said, there's a lot of opportunity still, and yeah, I mean, a lot of people have pulled back in different ways, and it's a good opportunity to not do that if that's the case.
Right. Yeah. What I'm seeing on my end is, the deals are still out there, but this is an unfair space. And the people who have the strongest track records, and as you were saying earlier, the strongest relationships with the brokers, they're going to be the ones. This is no different than any other time in the sense that the people who are the most likely to close and have the strongest track records, best relationships, are going to get the best deals. So this is where, leveraging relationships and partnerships is a good time. It's a good time to do that, to get involved in the good deals. So,
Mm-hmm.
so Luke, you're still in the W-2 world. Is there a plan to, full-time real estate on the horizon? Is that the goal? Talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah, that is the ultimate goal. And so right now we have like a 3-ish year plan, right, for me to transition out. It could potentially happen sooner. We feel like it definitely could, but we're also kind of tempering expectations because success isn't linear. It's always up and down along the way. But yeah, we feel that within a handful of years here, then I'll be able to transition out, and then it's a matter of having more flexibility and being able to spend more time, with Daisy, with our son, God willing, a second child as well, and just being able to kind of do more and have a larger impact with people too, right? I mean, then having more free time, right? It's more time to be able to do podcasts like this, or do calls with people, or do mentoring, or to actually improve communities, right? There's so much more that can be done. So that's the plan right now, and we feel good about where we are currently and tracking toward it.
Great. What kind of role, you mentioned mentorship? What kind of role has mentorship played? Coaching programs, mentorship, masterminds, all that kind of stuff. Involved in any of that?
Yeah, there was one that I did. It was actually through multifamily masters. It was more of a mastermind than an actual coaching program. Neither myself nor Daisy have ever done an actual coaching program. A lot of what we've picked up along the way has really been conversations with people. And I think more experienced sponsors were more willing to give us the time of day, because we were out there and, we were doing so much, and they saw that we moved and we had a podcast, and it was like, you were taking all this action, right? So a lot of it has just been building relationships over time, and then being able to ask questions and be respectful of people's time, obviously, right? But yeah, be able to ask questions from there. So it's just the route that we took. I think the coaching programs, there's several of them, and I know several people that have done very well with them. It just wasn't the path that we took. But I mean, it's like what you said earlier about individual tax advice, right? It's like, yeah, it's individualized. You have to go and consult with an expert and then figure it out for yourself which path you want to take.
Yeah, absolutely. Masterminds. And if anybody's not familiar with the term, because I know prior to getting into real estate investing, if you're new to the space, like if you told me to join a mastermind, I wouldn't know what you were talking about. And, essentially it's a group of like-minded individuals who have similar goals getting together. Everybody's at different phases of the journey, and, it's mutually beneficial. There's the experienced person and there's the new person. The new person's going to learn. More experienced person, you're always better at something if you know how to teach it, right? So yeah, I've gotten a ton of value out of those. I can't recommend it enough. And what Luke is saying, Daisy and Luke were taking action. So when people see that, they're going to be more likely to help. People love to see you taking action. It shows that you're engaged. If you're taking somebody's advice and implementing it, you're much more likely to be successful. And so While we're on the topic of learning, you mentioned Rich Dad, Poor Dad. We talked about Traction a little bit. What about any other books that have played a significant role in your journey thus far?
There's three big ones that come to mind. One I read when I was younger. It's The Alchemist, from Paulo Coelho. That's has nothing to do with real estate, but it's this idea of the universe conspiring to make sure that you're achieving what you want. Like if you take an aim at something, then you can achieve it. Essentially, that's, I would say, the thesis of the book, and I liked it. It's a really good book. And then after that, I would say something that I read after The Alchemist was Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill. I would say it's a seminal self-help book. Maybe there's others, right? But it's kind of one of one in my opinion. And a lot of the other self-help or business development or whatever books that are out there now kind of take and borrow from it in different ways, whether or not they're cognizant of it. And the last one is actually the Almanac of Naval Ravikant. So Naval Ravikant is an angel investor and startup founder, and has helped tons and tons of people become massively wealthy. And the Almanac is a collection of interviews, tweets, podcasts, live streams that he's done, and somebody else pulled all of these resources together. And the book is split into two things: it's how to get rich and how to be happy, and that's it. And so you can get the book for free. Great book, highly recommend it. That's the only book that I've read this year. I literally keep on rereading it and just taking more notes.
That's awesome. I'll have to check that one out. Yeah, I have one like that. It's a Jim Rohn audiobook. It's like his collection, and I just keep re-listening to it. And I just, at different points in my life, different phases of my journey, it's always applicable in some way. And, it's funny what you said about Napoleon Hill. I've read Think and Grow Rich, read it a few times. He recommends when you read it to go back through and read it a couple more times. And it's so true. It's like, if you read that and you've read other more modern self-help personal development books, it's like, okay, I see where all this is coming from. You kind of realize that everything is just getting regurgitated in a different way. Yeah, that's good stuff. And yeah, I'll definitely have to check out the Almanac. All right, Luke. So time for one more question here. So it's a question I ask all my guests. We discussed it a little bit earlier. So quick background: I work at Diablo Canyon Power Plant, last operational nuclear power plant in California. It's closing down in 2025. I am on a mission to replace my W-2 income with income from real estate. So we're on a similar time frame here. You mentioned 3 years out's the goal. So what is one piece of advice that you would offer to folks who are looking to utilize real estate or any other, business owner, entrepreneurial endeavors? What's your piece of advice you'd offer folks in our boat?
I would say, it's about getting around the right people. You can educate yourself, and that is important. And I know a lot of times, people will advocate for education. I think that's good. I have an advanced degree. I love getting educated, right? I'm not going to poo-poo that, but ultimately I feel like people will take you further than knowledge does in life. And there's things that, for all the listeners out there, like they can hit you up, John, and you can tell them something, and it's going to fast forward things 3, 6, 12 months for them, whereas it may have taken them forever to find and figure out that knowledge. And so I would say it's a matter of getting around the right people who are going to move you forward. That's what I think is the biggest thing, and the biggest advice that I would give. And that's what I've done.
Yeah, absolutely. That's that concept of the mastermind. And, especially in this real estate investing space, like everybody is so gracious with information and knowledge and happy to share. And so, good place to do that, meetup.com. You can get on there and meet other people, from anywhere in the world, anywhere in the country, pretty much any night of the week, you can find something. So yeah, that's great advice. Couldn't agree more. Hey, Luke, where can people find you if they want to reach out, follow along with what you're doing?
Yeah, the best place is really our website. It's makeitraincapital.com, and you can schedule a call with us or email us, whatever you'd like to do there. That's the best place. We're working on a couple of things coming out here soon, and just hope to have them as more and more resources for people, because our mission is to provide access and education for millennials to invest into multifamily real estate. So we're working on doing more of that, and that's the best place to reach out.
That's great. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Luc D'Abreau, Make It Rain Capital. Thanks so much for joining us. Thank you for listening to Freedom Investor Radio. If you like what you heard, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share with a friend. Thanks again for listening.